Hello everyone, this is Dr. Lamphere, and today we are going to be talking about concepts, operationalization, and measurement in social research. When we are talking about concepts, what we are talking about are the words or the symbols that we use to represent the mental images we have of a variable in our mind. Concepts allow us to make categories for organizing our ideas and our observations that we make. So when we say we are conceptualizing something, or the process of conceptualization, what we mean is that we're specifying precisely what it is we mean when we use a particular term. The purpose of doing a conceptualization is to provide ourselves with a working definition for our research. It helps us to focus our observations by showing us what we will study and what we will not study. This can be best represented through an example. One example of a concept that we often look at in social research is that of socioeconomic status. So when you think about somebody's SES or socioeconomic status, the first thing that often comes to mind is income. And yes, income is certainly a part of somebody's socioeconomic status, but socioeconomic status can encompass a lot more things besides income. It could have to do with the assets that somebody holds, the type of debt that somebody has, the education level that somebody possesses, the type of occupation that somebody has, the type of house someone lives in, the type of car they drive, the type of clothing they wear, even the type of language that somebody uses. All of these things could be used to measure somebody's socioeconomic status. So it's important that when you put out a variable that you want to measure, like socioeconomic status, that you conceptualize it precisely so that people know exactly what it is that you want to measure. And socioeconomic status, obviously seeing this list, can be conceptualized in many different ways. That's why it's important to make a distinction in how exactly you are going to measure a concept. So why are we so, it seems, almost preoccupied with measurement in quantitative research? The reason that measurement is important is because it allows us to make fine differences between people. We often in research distinguish between people in extreme ways. For example, think about biological sex. We classify people as male and female. But if we wanted to look at something like gender, which gender is a variable that can go along a very long continuum from very feminine to very masculine and everything in between, we can make a finer distinction between males and females. However, if you're going to measure something like gender, you're going to have to do it more precisely. And often to make these finer distinctions, it involves more difficult tasks. Measurements help give us a consistent device for making distinctions between variables. Defining measurement helps us to be consistent over time. It also allows us to be consistent with other researchers, meaning if I decide that I'm going to measure a concept in a particular way, I will be letting other researchers know how I'm measuring it, so if they ever want to replicate my study, they'll be aware of my specific levels of measurement. Measurement gives us the basis for more precise estimates of the degree of a relationship between our key concepts. So when we're talking about operationalization, which is kind of the other side of conceptualization, what we're talking about is the further specification, or the operations that we will undertake in measuring our concepts. It gives us the specifics on how we will measure a concept and our variables. And what's important to recognize about operationalization is that there's not one right answer. It's just how you're doing it in a particular study. For example, socioeconomic status. We just talked about how it could be defined in many ways. But suppose I define socioeconomic status as being someone's income and someone's education level. I would operationalize that by asking a question or a series of questions. I would want to ask people to measure their income, what their household income was for the past 12 months, and divide that by the number of people that were living in their household. And since I've also defined socioeconomic status as being income and education level, I would also need to ask what their highest level of school was that they had completed. So when we're talking about measurement, what we're talking about is how we're going to actually count or measure our concepts in the real world. We can do this many ways in the social sciences. Oftentimes we use the survey instrument, so we measure it through survey items. We could use a more qualitative route and measure our concepts through interview questions. We might also make our own observations. We might do a content analysis of pre-existing data, looking for themes among content such as music, movies, newspapers, television, sports. Or we might code an existing data set and measure something through statistical analysis. But when we say we're measuring something, what we're doing is we're assigning values or labels to the concepts that they are supposed to represent. It's important to recognize that in social research, sometimes we have to use multiple indicators in order to measure a single concept. It's because we recognize that there are potential problems with just using a single indicator or a single question to measure an underlying concept. One is that we may incorrectly classify individuals. The wording of a particular question might make somebody want to classify themselves in a way that is actually incorrect, and it becomes a product of misunderstanding rather than a correct classification. We also recognize that one indicator may only capture a portion of our underlying concept. So one question might be too general, and I will talk about that in a future slide. You may also be able to make a finer distinction between categories by using multiple indicators to measure a concept. Here's an example of incorrectly classifying an individual. When you ask a college student to identify their social class, some college students identify themselves as being middle class. And the reason they identify themselves as being middle class is because they are basing that on numerous factors, such as the fact that they are attending a college or a university, the type of car they drive, the type of clothes they wear, their parents' occupation, or a number of other factors. However, many college students struggle to make their ends meet, and with an income of less than $18,000 annually, many are living well below the poverty level. So if I ask a college student to report, "What is your social class?" they may incorrectly report that they are middle class. But if I decide to give a more precise level of measurement and ask them to report their actual income for the year rather than the type of class they feel they fall into, I can then classify them as lower, middle, or upper class based on their income. And that would be less risky, and I would be less likely to incorrectly classify them as being a class that they actually are not. An example of where one indicator may only capture a portion of an underlying concept can be seen in the concept of parental management. Gibbs and colleagues in 1998 conceptualized parental management as the ability of parents to manage their children, and they conceptualized it as having three essential elements, including monitoring your child's behavior, recognizing behavioral problems as they occur, and correcting bad behavior. So I could ask a survey respondent, "How well do you monitor your child's behavior?" And if I did that, though, I'd only be capturing a portion of the underlying concept. I'd only be capturing the monitoring aspect. In order for me to capture monitoring, recognition, and correction, I would have to ask multiple questions in order to capture all three elements. So what you can see here is examples of how I could measure monitoring of behavior, how I could measure recognition of problem behavior, and how I could measure correction of bad behaviors. And what I would do is I would ask these 6 questions, and then all of these indicators would be combined to give us a measurement of somebody's parental management. And I'm going to have a far more accurate indication of parental management than if I just asked one question, such as, "How is your parental management?" Something that is important for you to recognize is that we have differing levels of measurement, and the level of measurement that we use determines how precise our measures are. In the social sciences, we have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio level of measurement. Nominal level of measurement is where we offer names or labels for a characteristic. Nominal measures have no numerical interpretation, meaning you can't assign any type of value to the categories. and you can't rank order the variables in any meaningful way. So for example, if I ask somebody, what's your gender, male or female, that's a nominal level of measurement because they can't assign a numeric value to it. If I ask somebody, what is your religious affiliation, and then I listed religious affiliations and asked them to pick one, that would be a nominal level of measurement because I'm simply offering names or labels for the characteristic, and you can't give a numerical interpretation. If I had a list of college majors and I asked somebody to pick their major off of a list, that's an example of nominal level of measurement because you can't assign any numerical value to the college majors. Somebody's hair color, somebody's birthplace, somebody's nationality. Asking anybody to identify these characteristics about themselves is an example of a nominal level of measurement because you cannot offer any numerical interpretation for the measure. The nominal level of measurement is our least precise level of measurement. Moving up in precision, the next level of measurement that we will discuss is the ordinal level of measurement. Ordinal measures have all the property of nominal level measures. The exception is that the attributes or the responses might be logically rank ordered. However, the distance between the categories has no meaning or it is not equal. Examples we see of this: if I ask somebody what their college class is, freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, I know that a junior has more college credits than a freshman, but I don't know exactly how many more credits that junior has than that freshman. Or if I ask somebody to rank their social class as being low, middle, or upper class, I know that a person that ranks themselves as upper class is a higher ranking than someone that ranks themselves as lower class, but I don't know an exact distance between a lower, a middle, or an upper class person. We see this in social sciences when we use Likert scales, when we ask somebody their level of agreement with something. So if I asked you the question, I like pizza, and I asked you, do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with that statement? I would know that somebody that strongly agrees with the statement likes pizza more than someone that strongly disagrees with the statement. But I can't put an exact numeric value between somebody strongly agreeing to something and somebody strongly disagreeing to something. So I can rank them, but I can't put a numerical value to them. The next most precise level of measurement that we have is the interval level of measurement. Interval levels of measurement has all the properties of nominal and ordinal levels of measurement. But the variables for which we are measuring have an actual distance between the attributes, and that actual distance has a meaning. What makes interval levels of measurement different from ratio levels of measurement is that interval levels of measurement do not have a true 0 point. So for example, if I'm measuring temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit does not have a true meaningful 0 point, meaning I can have negative values such as minus 10 degrees or minus 20 degrees. But I know that the difference between minus 20 degrees and plus 20 degrees is 40 degrees, so I know an actual exact distance between the values. Or if we're looking at somebody's IQ score, if you take an IQ test, you can't technically have a 0 IQ score. So IQ does not have a true 0 point. But I know the difference between somebody having a 90 IQ and somebody having 100 IQ is exactly 10 IQ points. So there's an exact distance between the values, but that there is not a true meaningful 0 point. The next level of measurement, which in the social sciences we treat ratio and interval levels of measurement as the same, but there is a distinction between them, is the ratio level of measurement. Ratio variables have attributes that meet the requirements of an interval measure, so they meet the requirements of a nominal or ordinal measure, but ratio level variables have a true meaningful 0 point. So examples would include if we measured temperature in degrees Kelvin, that would be an example of ratio level measurement because Kelvin has a true 0 point of absolute zero. If we measured length of time, we start measuring time at 0 seconds, and I know the exact distance between 30 seconds and 90 seconds is exactly 60 seconds. So there's an exact distance between the values and it has a meaningful 0 point. If I looked at the number of organizations that existed on a campus, that has a meaningful 0 point, meaning we start the measurement at 0 organizations. And I know the difference between 5 organizations and 20 organizations is exactly 15 organizations. So there's an exact distance between the measurement points. This is the same thing if you're looking at the number of groups that are on a campus or the number of credits that somebody receives in college. If somebody has 15 credits and you compare them to somebody who has 75 credits, you know the distance between them is exactly 60 credits, and we start measuring credits at 0. This is just a chart to show you the different levels of measurement. So for example, a nominal level of measurement is somebody's sex. We measure that as being male or female. We can't assign any numeric value to it, and we can only give names to the category. An ordinal level of measurement, an example of that would be if you ask somebody how important is religion to you, and you had them rank that from not very important to the most important thing in your life. Now we can make a distinction between these in the sense that I know if somebody ranks religion as the most important thing in their life and somebody else ranks it as not very important, I know that the person that ranked it as being most important values it more than the person that ranked it as not important. But I can't put any numerical distance between those values. IQ is an example of an interval level of measurement. So I know the exact distance between values. I know that somebody that has a 95 IQ has 20 less IQ points than somebody who has an IQ of 115. But IQ does not have a true meaningful 0 point, meaning you can't have a 0 IQ. An example of a ratio level of measurement would be if we were asking somebody to report their income. We start measuring income at $0, so it has a meaningful 0 point, and we know an exact distance between values. So I know that the exact distance between someone who makes $10,000 and someone who makes $50,000 is $40,000. So why do we care about measurement? Because measurement helps us determine how precise of a value we are going to capture when we are measuring something. Nominal is our least precise level of measurement, whereas ratio or interval level data is our most precise level of measurement. It's important to remember that you can always go from a higher level of measurement to a lower level of measurement, but you can never go from a lower level of measurement to a higher level of measurement. What do I mean by this? An example would be if I ask somebody to report being lower class, middle class, or upper class, I can't then make a finer distinction between those categories based on income because I didn't ask them to report their income. I just asked them to report whether they were lower, middle, or upper class. So that's an example of where I measured something at the ordinal level, and I can't then later go and look at it at the ratio level by looking at exact distances between income because I measured it ordinally. However, if I measured income and I asked somebody to report the exact dollar amount that they made, that would be the ratio level data because I know that we start measuring income at 0 and I know an exact distance between the values. I know that someone that makes $10,000 makes $40,000 less dollars than someone who makes $50,000. So if I measured something at the ratio level, I could then go back and I could say, okay, anyone who makes between $0 and $30,000 is lower class, $30,000 to $60,000 is middle class, and $60,000 to $90,000 is upper class. And I could take those people and I could plug them from the ratio level of measurement into an ordinal level of measurement. And that would be an example of me going from a higher level to a lower level. So it's important to remember that you can always go from a higher level of measurement down to a lower level of measurement, but you can't go from a lower level of measurement to a higher level of measurement. So that's why it's important for you to try to measure at the most precise value that you can. The level of measurement also affects what type of statistics we can use to analyze something. There are some statistical tests that require us to measure something at the interval or ratio level in order to run them. So that's why it's important for us to determine level of measurement. And as I noted before, in statistics, we treat interval and ratio level variables the same. The only distinction between interval and ratio level variables is that ratio has a meaningful 0 point, whereas interval does not. Here are some questions to test if you understand level of measurement. So if I asked you to report what dorm you lived in, what level of measurement would that be? If I asked you to report your fear of crime and I measured it as being a lot, some, or none, what would that level of measurement be? If I asked someone to report the name on an athlete's jersey, what level of measurement would that be? Or if I asked somebody to report the number of children they had in a family, what level of measurement would that be? The dorm that somebody lives in is an example of a nominal level of measurement. I can't rank order the name of a dorm, and all I can do is assign it a name. Asking somebody to report their fear of crime as being a lot, some, or none is an example of an ordinal level of measurement. I know that somebody that has a lot of fear of crime has more fear of crime than someone who has no fear of crime, but I don't know an exact value. I can't put in a numerical value between a lot and none. I just know that a lot is more than none. So it's the ordinal level of measurement. The name on an athlete's jersey would be another example of a nominal level of measurement. It's nominal because all we can do is assign a name or a new nominal or name value to it. We can't put any numerical meaning to it. And the number of children that somebody has in their family would be an example of the ratio level of measurement. It's ratio because we start measuring at 0 children. We don't start measuring at -1 children or -2 children. 0 is the starting point where you start measuring how many children somebody has. And I know the exact distance between the values. So if someone reports having 1 child and another person reports having 10 children, I know the exact distance between them is 9 children.